Welcome everyone to our final installment, our final webinar for the Cover Cropping Opportunities and Specialty Crops series. This has been a series developed in collaboration between the Contra Costa Resource Conservation District and the UC Cooperative Extension, both the crop production and urban agriculture programs in the East Bay. And so today we're going to discuss financial help opportunities for cover cropping. Hopefully you will have seen some of our other webinars that covered kind of the technical aspects as well as the benefits and challenges of cover cropping. If you haven't seen any of those or haven't seen all of them, you can access them at the link you can see here at the bottom of the screen, ucanr.edu/covercropscoco for Contra Costa. You can also just scan that QR code there. You could probably do it right off your screen now, or if you want to do a screen grab, if you still have the flyer that you learned about this program from, you can access it there. But all of our recordings are there. This program is being recorded and will be installed there too. So these resources will be there for you to refer to in the future. And also we have a series of virtual site visits, kind of videos visiting with folks practicing cover cropping coming up in the near future. And we can keep you informed about that. So usually we have the RCD as our co-hosts, but today they, along with the NRCS, National Resource Conservation Service, are going to be presenting. First, I'm introduce myself. My name is Kamyar Aram. I am the Specialty Crops Advisor for UC Cooperative Extension in the East Bay counties of Contra Costa and Alameda. And we have with us Rob Benetton. Rob as the Bay Area Urban Agriculture Advisor. I'm going to say hello, Rob.
Hello, good morning and welcome.
And we have also Julio Contreras, Community Education Specialist, also with the Urban Agriculture Program.
Saludos todos, thank you for joining us.
Fantastic. So I'm going to take a minute to introduce our presenters. Like I mentioned, Ben Weise and Derek Emmons are usually co-hosts here, but today they are presenters. To give you a little bit of background, Ben Weise started work at the Contra Costa RCD in January of 2017, right after graduating from Indiana University with a master's degree focused on environmental policy and natural resource management. And as the Agriculture Conservation Manager, Ben manages a number of projects conserving natural resources in annual crops, orchards, vineyards, and rangeland systems. And under the Agriculture Conservation Program, Ben also leads the voluntary local program that protects and improves conditions for threatened and endangered species in rangelands. Also the Carbon Farm Planning Program, where he works with farmers and ranchers to increase their carbon sequestration on farm and to build soil health. And to deal with also illegal dumping issues, so cleanup and prevention, to help farms remove and prevent illegal dumping on their properties. So if any of those things resonate, you can reach out to Ben. And of course, also regarding these kinds of financial help programs we'll discuss today. Derek Emmons is also with us from the Contra Costa RCD. He graduated in 2010 from UC Santa Cruz with a BA in Environmental Studies, specifically on sustainable food systems. He also earned a master's degree in geography from California State University at Long Beach in 2020. His professional experience includes urban forestry, environmental education, regenerative landscape design, and community development. He has worked with the Agriculture Conservation as the Agriculture Conservation Coordinator with the Contra Costa RCD since October of last year. And he's actively pursuing opportunities for collaboration now engaging land managers, urban and rural farmers, both, to identify strategies that balance immediate social needs with long-term vitality of working lands. So you can reach out to Derek for those interests. Finally, we have the privilege of having Brenda Phrakonekham with us. Brenda is with the NRCS in Contra Costa County. She started her path as a pathway student intern for the USDA in 2017, working in Vacaville and in Templeton. And she obtained her BS in Environmental Earth Science with a concentration in land and water resources in March of 2018. She became soil conservationist with the NRCS after graduating, starting in Stockton in 2020, but she has been with the Concord Field Office so she was in Stockton until 2020, and she has been in the Concord Field Office since then, assisting farmers and landowners in the Contra Costa County to apply for conservation practices on the ground. So Brenda will be starting us off this morning. So thanks for joining us, and I'm going to stop my screen share and hand it over to Brenda. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me here. As Kamyar stated, I am a soil conservationist in the Concord Field Office, and I am here to present to you some financial opportunities with the Natural Resources Conservation Service. You'll see here that Claire Hernandez Vargas is the district conservationist for the Contra Costa Field Office. So that is another potential planner you would be encountering if you ever were to contact us. So let's get started on the what we can do for you. So if you are new to NRCS or has not worked with NRCS before, we have been in the business of helping people help the land for roughly 80 years now. We provide technical and financial assistance for agriculture producers and landowners. We do create, generally the general preview is we create conservation plans with the producers to apply to address resource concerns on the property. In California specifically, we are split up into 4 different areas. Each county has their own field office. For Contra Costa, of course, it will be in Concord, technically Clayton, but there is 4 different areas separating California. So just an overview on what we do for conservation planning. As stated, we do assist landowners reach their conservation goals. Generally, we do provide technical assistance as well, so it does not have to be financial assistance for our producers. And we work alongside a multitude of soil scientists, agronomists, rangeland specialists, whatever we need to address the resource concern on the property. We do emphasize that we are a voluntary, non-regulatory agency, and we focus mainly on private lands. We do technically work with anything on public lands if the applicant has a lease or anything like that, but generally it is focused mainly on private lands. There is a broad range of the resource concerns. We kind of squish it into one little acronym we like to call SWAP technically plus H, which is a soil, water, air, plants, animal, energy, and H is the human aspect of it. In those categories, there's different sections within those that we focus on to address the resource concerns, such as erosion and things and so forth. So that is what we will focus on when we do look for the resource concerns when we do go out and do our conservation planning. This section is kind of a big paragraph of the different categories that we try to assist with our farmers. So we do try our best to assist and provide extra assistance for our historically underserved, such as stated here, socially disadvantaged, beginning farmer, limited resource, and our veteran farmers. And there is specific requirements to claim those benefits there, but we do try our best to provide extra assistance to those to the farmers. Our biggest categories would be beginning farmer, which is generally anybody who has not farmed consecutively for 10 years is the general requirement for that, and that it goes much deeper once we do start applying, and we always cross-reference that with, of course, our farm service agency, which is our sister agency that we work with. Another big category would be socially disadvantaged, and it depends on whether the producer and or landowner identifies as any of the categories below. One suggestion people ask for gender, but unfortunately that is not covered in this socially disadvantaged. It just depends on if the person identifies as any of these categories. Another one would be limited resource farmer. That one is fairly rare, but there is that opportunity. Generally, the general explanation they would like to say is kind of if you're kind of below the poverty level for the county is that one, but it's kind of rare to address, to claim this one here. Usually it'll be one or the other. And then veteran, we do also like to assist our veteran farmers for if you like to identify as a veteran farmer / rancher. Again, these are all pretty, there's a big requirement for these. It's really long, but usually when you do come into the office, we do try our best to make sure that if you would like to claim one of these, we just make sure that you are claiming them correctly, and we would move forward with that. Moving on to the program that generally most of our farmers and landowners apply for, we do have a multitude, but the biggest one is our environmental quality incentives program, which does stand for EQIP. You'll hear that word thrown around a couple of times, but it is the broadest program assistance we do have for our producers that provide financial assistance. Again, as always, EQIP is voluntary and it's non-regulatory. It does provide financial and technical assistance to agriculture producers to address their resource concerns on their property. As stated, it's a incentive program, so generally it does not cover the entire project on what usually the producer would like to do, but it does pay a portion based on what the conservation practice is. And one important point would be also is there is a payment cap for each producer, which is $450,000 during either a 6-year period or whatever the farm bill would be for those years. To be eligible, it's generally you do have to have a couple of situations to be eligible. One, of course, you do have to be an agricultural producer or forestry management if you do have anything in forests. And then also you do need to have control of the property for the term of the project, and that term of the contract, it really just depends on what you apply for. It will be different for each practice. You do need to be in compliance with any highly erodible land or wetland conservation compliances. And also there is going to be payment limitations for some practices, along with you cannot exceed the adjusted gross income requirement as well, which is less than $900,000 in an average 3 years period. And again, this is a lot of information, so this is definitely something we would go over with you if you were to come in and apply. It is not something that you need to know beforehand. That's something that we always go over with our applicants whenever they come in. As stated earlier, the eligible land, generally we do work with mainly private landowners, but if you do have land such as if you are leasing through a park district or things like that, as long as there is a way to attach it to the property and you do lease and things like that, that wouldn't be off limits. We do have some contracts that's within publicly owned land, but generally it is in private land. In terms of the land itself, it does need to have resource concerns involved. We need to be addressing a resource concern, of course, to be able to provide payment for any conservation practices we implement on the ground. And then another thing that we point out is generally for any irrigation related practices, the land does have to have been irrigated 2 out of the last 5 years to install any irrigation related practices. There is a couple ways how to apply. Generally, the general way that would like to apply is you would come into an NRCS field office and ask that you would like a conservation plan to be written up. And with that conservation plan, you can either apply with every single thing that we've come up with, written resource concerns and any practices to address those resource concerns we find at the planning. And with that, we can either choose a certain amount of practices you would like to address at that time. Oh, sorry. And we would complete an application then. And then we, of course, need to make sure that the land and the producer is eligible for the program. And that's just through a bunch of, unfortunately, bureaucratic forms and things like that. But we generally try to make it as easy as possible for our farmers. And then, of course, it goes into what we call a ranking situation before it gets chosen for funding. It is not on a first come, first served basis. Generally, of course, the earlier you apply, the better we can assist and get all the documentation we need before we go into ranking. And then, but generally, the ranking is what determines on who gets funded and who doesn't. Each year it is different. We have batching periods that we have each year, and each batching period is just set every year differently, unfortunately. So it's not something we know ahead of time. But whenever we do take applications year round, and when we do take the application, we tend to just apply the application to whatever ranking deadline is upcoming or upcoming, and we can get all the documentation and meetings done in that time frame. So definitely it is not first come, first serve. It's just we always like to encourage our producers just come in as early as possible. If you have an idea, just definitely come in and see what we can do within that time frame. So the available practices, of course, one is cover crop. That is one of the ones that I know that's been pretty emphasized throughout this whole program, but we do a couple of other practices such as irrigation systems, orchard removal, and things like that. We have a multitude of practices, and I would say that there is, I can provide a website if it hasn't been already, but I can provide the website of what we do assist on. Again, I do have to emphasize that there has to be a resource concern on the property, but I always tell my farmers that the best way for me is if you call and there's a project that you want to do, it never hurts to call your local office and ask if we financially assist, and we can move on from there. I always think that may be the easiest way because we provide so much conservation practices that it's hard to kind of list them all. But these are a couple of the ones and kind of the more popular ones that we do. So, as stated, we do cover crop. Of course, there's there's multiple different purposes for them, such as, reducing erosion, increasing the organic matter, increasing biodiversity. So it just really depends on what the property needs itself for the cover crop. For this one mainly, there's just a general criteria for the cover crop. And again, we will definitely go over this with you if you were to ever apply. Such as, you can't burn the cover crop residue. Of course, we would like to not do that. Such as when termination is possible, because we want to make sure that the cover crop is utilized to its best ability. So just a couple of different conditions that we will go over with you on whether if you would like to apply for cover crop through NRCS. And just a couple of other practices we do, irrigation efficiency, for example, we do convert to more efficient systems. For example, if you have a property in flood irrigation, we can assist to move to either solid set or micro irrigation. That is something we financially assist on. In conjunction to that, we do provide irrigation water management, where we install monitoring devices to better irrigate the property. Along with that, another option we do is orchard removal. That's another popular one with everyone going into trees. That's one that we do have where we assist on paying with removing the orchard and chipping it, of course, to avoid burning the chips. And there's a couple of ways that we can, a couple of options that we can go to avoid doing so. And we do a pay upon that. High tunnels is one that we've had a couple come in for high tunnels. I personally myself haven't been able to work on it myself. I know that there has been a couple of high tunnel applications, and I know that a lot of people tend to use it to extend their growing season for some high value crops. So that is something we do assist on if you're interested in that as well. And then one of the more popular programs we do have is the NAQI program, which is the National Air Quality Initiative. Some people, you'll hear it called the tractor program, where you do bring in a tier 0 to tier 2 old tractor that you've owned for at least 2 years. And we assist on paying for a new tractor. You would be destroying the old one, of course. So we do assist in that. That's one of the more popular programs we do have. Again, like I said, we do have a multitude of practices. I think we have over 200. I could be wrong, but I think that we do have a lot. So I would say that if you're interested, such as a windbreak or a hedgerow, we do spring developments, livestock water improvements on rangelands, or even pastures. We have a multitude of practices. So I definitely say that if you are interested in anything, please, give us a call, and we can definitely let you know on if we can assist on that. This is our contact information. So like I stated before, Claire Hernandez is our district conservationist, but you're more than welcome to contact her as well. She is one of the planners in the office, but the main planners would be myself, which is Brenda Phrakonekham, and Dwayne Coffey is another planner in the office. If you are interested in any of the practices listed, or if there's something here that you did not see, definitely give us a call and we'll be happy to help you and see what we can do for your property. And then Kamyar, onto you, or Beth?
Yep. Thank you very much. Actually, so Brenda, I was going to save questions until the end, but we do have just one question that might be worth answering right now, which is the requirements for qualification that you mentioned at the beginning. John asks, can we find these requirements online?
Sure. We should. The NRCS EQIP has their own little section. I can input that URL into the chat box if that's okay, Kamyar. I can do that.
That sounds good. Actually, kindly do that in the Q&A box itself, if you can.
Okay, sure. Okay, yeah, I can.
We'll have that on record too, and everyone can view that too.
Okay, sure, yeah. And then I don't think there should be any problem coming up, but if you are providing slides after, I can also provide the slide for this, and this can be sent out to the participants as well.
I appreciate that very much. We have it recorded, so I think folks can refer back to this once we put the recording up. Thank you so much, Brenda.
No problem.
And yeah, great. Oh, I had a question for you actually. But maybe I'll save that for, well, no, I'll ask the question now if you don't mind. Just think, you said, I was kind of fascinated by, you said you can't burn the cover crop. And I just, it's maybe a fine distinction, but in many cases, folks, I imagine what you mean is that you can't set the cover crop on fire. In some cases, folks refer to using herbicide as burn down.
Yes.
That would be allowed to terminate a cover crop using herbicide?
Yeah. Generally, herbicide's fine. I think a lot of the producers, at least in my experience, most of them just kind of mow them down. But yeah, I'm pretty sure they can use herbicide. I'm pretty sure it's just more like we can't burn them. Actually, yeah. Good
question. Was just a point of curiosity. I know that's not the ideal way to terminate a crop, but in some cases that's done.
Yeah. Majority of the farmers that at least work, I haven't worked much, as I technically am still quote unquote just starting with the agency, but with the cover crops, in my experience, most of them just actually ended up mowing them after they're done. So that would be interesting to see the first one.
Thank you so much. So if you go ahead and stop sharing your screen, and I think we'll go ahead and pass on to Ben Weise.
There we go. Everyone can see my presentation now?
Yes.
All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Weise. I'm the Ag Conservation Manager here at Contra Costa Resource Conservation District. And I'm here to kind of jump off of the wonderful presentation Brenda just gave about EQIP and talk about the state's Healthy Soils program, which I like to refer to as almost EQIP Light. So let's get going. But first, just a quick introduction to resource conservation districts, if you're not aware. We've been around, like Brenda said, for about 80 years now. The NRCS is our sister agency, so we are often co-located together. I know here in Concord, we share our office. I'm actually in the office today. There's a map here that shows all of the various conservation districts across the state. There's about 90. So if you're watching this and you're not in Contra Costa or Alameda, I know Alameda has a great resource conservation district as well. Feel free to go to it's www.carcd.org. And you can look at this map and get the contact information for your local RCD, because they should be able to help you with just about anything that we're talking about here. Likewise, the NRCS, I think for the most part, operates on the same map. So lots of good information out there. Go connect with folks all around the state. So today I'll talk about the Healthy Soils Incentives Program. The state has a program. The California Department of Food and Agriculture actually has two programs are under the umbrella of the Healthy Soils Program. The first is the Healthy Soils Incentives Program. That's the one we're going to be talking about mostly today. Separately, if you're looking around online, there's the Healthy Soils Demonstration Program. That program is reserved more for RCDs like myself or the UC Cooperative Extension as well. So you can apply to those, but you would need to work through us. What the Healthy Soils Incentives Program, which I'll talk about here, that's meant more for individual farmers. And it's a cost share program or a financial help program, similar in nature to EQIP, except for it's on a smaller scale. Because really what it's doing is it's providing financial incentive to implement conservation practices that are sequestering carbon. So by and large, putting plants in the ground, so things like hedgerows or cover crops, like we've been talking about, would be funded under this, but it doesn't quite get into some of the other programs that Brenda was talking about, like tractor replacement or anything like that. Really, we're focusing on taking carbon out of the atmosphere and putting it into the soil, or keeping carbon locked up in soil. So talk about a little bit about what the program has done. And I guess I'll also put a little caveat here that says we're still waiting on full information on what the next round of this application will look like. So some of the information I'd say today may change. We should know more here soon. Everything that I'm presenting on from here has been my experience with it in the past. I don't expect it to change drastically, but there could be just little things that change and make it different. So the program's been around here since 2017, and it's funded 646 projects across just over 56,000 acres and distributed about $41.5 million in grant funding. With that, we estimate that we'll sequester just about 111,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, which is equivalent to removing about 23,000 cars off the road. So it's been a very good program. It's still growing. And we'll talk more about that later, but I figured I'd also give the opportunity here to let some of the farmers that have gone through this program talk about it themselves. So I'll go ahead and play this video and let me know if the audio.
With healthy soil, it's not just about creating a good walnut. I mean, it certainly is. There are other benefits to it. It makes our job easier as farmers. We use less inputs. We sink more water. We create better nutrient density in our food. But at the same time, with healthy soil and with a no-till organic system, we're trying to use these trees to pull carbon out of the atmosphere and sink it into the soil, where we hope that it stays. What's good for the soil is generally good for us. So every improvement we can make down here comes forth up here in better food, less inputs, better moisture and water retention, less pest pressure. So in our Healthy Soils project, we implemented cover crop and composting. In just 2 years, we're already seeing bumps in our soil organic matter. If we are increasing that, we're both increasing our sink, the amount of carbon that we can hold in the soil, and our store, the amount of carbon that we're putting into the soil. The Healthy Soils program really affirms these practices: composting, cover crop, no tillage, habitat, hedgerow restoration. These are all things that we want to engage with, we really believe in, and the Healthy Soils program gives us both the financial and some institutional support to enact them.
That was from a walnut farm up in Winters. Next, we'll hear from a vineyard up.
have plants along the ditch to filter water. You have this diversity of plant life, of carbon in the soil. The soil has an increased water holding capacity, so we can irrigate with significantly less water. We also have raptor perches and bluebird boxes and owl boxes. It's just an opportunity to create habitat for beneficial insects and wildlife.
All right, back to the presentation. So like they talked about, they mentioned a few practices that are eligible underneath this program. I've listed just a few here that I think most folks in our area have been interested in the past. Certainly cover cropping, that's been the topic of these webinars for the last, 8 or 9 months. Hedgerow planting, like you can see on this bottom left photo here on the edge of a field. Establishing windbreaks or shelter belts if you've got significant wind erosion. As well as compost application, both going out and purchasing compost from a CDFA approved provider, or they will also provide funding to get your own compost application built on farm. That's something new that they started last year, and I believe they will continue. I've also got a photo up here, similar to what Brenda talked about, recycling orchards that, the trees have gotten to an age where they need to be recycled and replanted. And rather than burn all that great biomass, we'd love to chip it up, apply it as mulch, or take it to an approved biomass facility. In total, I think there's about 30 practices across row crop systems, vineyards, orchards, and rangeland systems. So there's a lot of good stuff to talk about that's going to sequester a bunch of carbon. Another great part of this program is that you can partner it with the NRCS EQIP program and kind of get both programs going so that you're getting funding from both pots and potentially cover a lot of the financial parts of these practices. So here's what we know. I was just reading this morning about the latest on where we're at with this program. So back in January, Governor Newsom initially proposed a $30 million pot of funding for this program that would be used across 2 solicitations, ideally happening this summer, and then I think again in this fall. But then again in May, given our better financial picture as a state, he has increased that pot of money up to $100 million at present. That was the last I had heard. Obviously, budget negotiations are still ongoing, but I think things are looking pretty good. And we should know definitely by June 15th. I believe that's the date that they have to have the budget approved. So keep an ear out. The large takeaway is there should be some good funding available here pretty soon. And as soon as we know anything here at the RCD, we'll obviously be blasting it and trying to get folks signed up. Likewise, we at the RCD here, we have applied to be a technical assistance provider. If we are selected to be a technical assistance provider, which we've done, I believe, every year of the solicitation, we are able to provide free application assistance to this program for farmers and ranchers. So please do not hesitate to contact us. We're here to help you guys take advantage of this program and get some good practices out on your farm. The best way to stay in touch, you may already be on it, is going to www.ccrcd.org/agriculture. There you can sign up for our mailing list. As soon as we learn anything about this program, when it's going to open, what it's going to look like, we'll be putting details in there. And then, you can reply to that email and we can get a conversation going about setting up a site visit and getting out to your farm to take a look at what we could potentially apply for. So if I've already piqued your interest, how do I sign up? What do I do next? First and foremost, you need to determine your eligibility. By and large, it's a pretty open program. Really, you just need to be a California agricultural operation. So that includes, by definition, row crop systems, vineyards, field systems, tree crops, commercial nurseries, nursery stock, livestock products, and urban farms. So it's a pretty wide-ranging definition. Where it kind of gets a little gray is around university and research farms or community gardens. So that's something that I would definitely encourage you not to feel like you can apply, but at least come talk with us. We can help make that distinction and we can apply and let the state say, no, that's that's typically how I run things. I don't like to stop people. I'd like someone else higher than me to tell me, no, that doesn't work. But by and large, I think most agricultural operations will qualify. Another important part of this program is that the goal is to sequester carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. So it needs to, the project itself needs to result in a net sequestration, which means that it needs to be connected to the soil itself. We can't be doing these types of things in, container beds that aren't connected to the ground. That's ultimately the goal of this program, is to put carbon in the ground. So if we're disconnecting it by a container or potted plants or something, we're not going to get that net benefit that we're looking. And then I'll talk a little bit about the grant application process, and again, put in the caveat that this is based on my experience the last couple of years. I don't expect significant changes, but you never know. The way this typically works is you'll contact Derek or I, and then we'll get together with you and schedule a site visit to get to know your farm, get to know you, see what you're growing, see maybe where some of your problem areas are, identify some of your resource concerns, and see how this program could fit. After we've had that initial site visit, we'll start some work plan development, maybe on site, but it'll probably be offline. You could, maybe we'll arrange something where we meet in the field, or we bring you into our office to talk a little bit more about this. And then, we'll develop a work plan together about, what practices and when we're going to do them and how often we're going to do them and how large we're going to do them. That's one of the big key pieces of this application process. Then we'll also develop a budget. And the way these budgets are developed, you can kind of see an example here off on the right. But when you more or less take these conservation practices, which are also the same conservation practices the NRCS has, and then calculate the acreage that we're going to be doing. So you can see here that we just simply put in 20 acres, for cover cropping as an example. And then you could expect to receive $6,402. That was last year's payment rate. So I expect that to change, but probably not too drastically. And they have payment rates for all of these various management practices. In terms of budget constraints, we're limited to about $100,000 over 3 years. That is the cap. And then these practices, or the payment rates, typically try to cover about 50% of anticipated project costs. Of course, a lot of that's developed at a very high level, with a lot of input, so it's not 50% exact. But they do try to hit that 50% target, I believe, more or less. And it's the same deal as the work plan. We'll develop this over 2 or 3 years, working with your funding constraints in line too. We want to make sure that we have good project success. Then the last step is applying, doing the actual grant application itself, filling out more or less the administrative part of the grant, farm name, farm address, contact name, APN, all sorts of good stuff like that. Derek and I are more than happy to help walk people through that and communicate with you about what we'll need in terms of documents and all that. By and large, a pretty painless process. So then if your application gets selected for an award, how this has worked in previous years, in the early years of this program, grants were awarded by a ranking system like Brenda talked about. So the highest scoring applications typically got funded. Those applications, or those years, I would say, had smaller funding pools, so they really had to be really smart with the amount of money they had. The way that it works last year, at least, was these things were done on a first come, first served basis. If I had to guess, next year, these would likely be on a first come, first served basis again, but we'll know more once the program details are finalized here. If you're interested, now, what can you do to prepare for this next coming solicitation? Like I've mentioned before, the best way to prepare is just get on our mailing list and wait for us to let you know when the program opens. Likewise, start thinking about your own farm. What resource concerns do you have? Are you not attracting as many pollinators as you think you might need? Are you looking just to build soil health because you have poor soil quality? Do you have significant sources of wind or water erosion on your farm? Are there areas on the whole that are just underperforming as compared to maybe other parts of your farm? Really just start thinking about the whole picture of your farm and what you think you would like to improve and what some of your resource concerns are. If you come to us with those concerns ahead of time, Derek and I can kind of be a little more prescriptive with what may address some of those concerns and at the same time sequester carbon dioxide into the soil. Likewise, be thinking about what the next 2 to 3 years of your farm look like. Are you on a crop rotation? Are you going to keep the same orchard in place for the next 3 to 5 years? These are questions that the state is going to want to know as well. You aren't necessarily married to it if something happens and you need to change course in a couple of years. They just want to know kind of what they're funding ultimately. Like Brenda mentioned too, we will need to get landowner letter support. So if you own the land, that's great. But if you are leasing the farm from some other person, you're going to need to get in writing from that person that they approve of you applying and putting these practices out on the ground. It's something that if you get far enough ahead of, it's not that much of an issue. But sometimes it's the last little thing. Oh yeah, we forgot to get that landowner letter support. And then the last kind of thing is start compiling some baseline data for your farm. The state's going to want to know what you've done on the farm since, I believe, 2017, that maybe go up to 2018. More or less just what crops you've been using or what crops you've been planting. Likewise, any management practices that you might have done in previous healthy soil solicitations or through various NRCS EQIP applications as well. Just because you've done it in the past doesn't mean you can't get funded again. So definitely let us know. They just want to, what they're trying to get at here is establish what the actual carbon benefit of some of these practices will be. Likewise, they're going to want to know what you're planning to do in the future for the next 3 years, I believe. Again, we'll know more here as soon as details are finalized, but these are questions they've typically asked in the past. Other information that you probably need to know is that an element of this project is that we will be doing soil testing on your farm. And with that, it gets a little into the weeds, so to speak, depending on how many soil types you might have on your farm or if there's specific areas you want to be testing. This is something also that the state will be paying for. So you will be expected to do an annual soil test to actually see if we're increasing the stock of carbon dioxide or other greenhouse gases in the soil. Likewise, we here at the RCD can help you with protocols for doing that, getting it sent to a proper lab for analysis and all that good stuff. So don't be scared off by this. It's pretty straightforward and it's not too difficult of a task. But it is, it's some cool information that you'll be able to get. And then I think this is almost my last slide. Some of the other information you need to know is if, let's say best case scenario, this program opens up July 1st and they start accepting applications and you get funded, you probably won't be able to do any implementation until 2022. The first year or so is more or less working with the state, refining the application, getting everything straightened out, getting into contract with the state. And that does take a little bit of time. So just know that if you're applying to this program with the idea of putting cover crops in the ground this fall, that may not be the case. I can't say for certain, it could happen, but I would plan on probably 2022 being a safer implementation. Likewise, this is a reimbursement grant. So you are expected to go out and purchase the seed and purchase the equipment or whatever else you need for your various management practices or find a way to use someone else's equipment. And then afterwards, after you provide necessary documentation to the state, they will reimburse you with the financial help. So you can see here on the right, I think I've included what that looks like for cover crops. Specifically, they want to see the receipt of the cover crop seed that you purchased. And then they want to see a photo of the cover crop out on the field too. So it's not too hard to verify that you're doing what you said you're doing. As well, they've got some implementation guidelines off to the right there as well. Yeah, and with that, I'll turn it over to Derek, and that's the end of the Healthy Soils presentation. So Derek here will talk a little bit about some other maybe nonprofit opportunities for financial help.
Cool. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Brenda. Thank you, Ben, for sharing about EQIP and Healthy Soils program. I just want to reiterate that these grants exist to support and encourage you, the producer. But like most things, the current government programs are imperfect and one shoe doesn't necessarily fit all. So lucky for you, there's multiple pathways forward if you would like to implement a cover crop or any other kind of soil conservation practice. So some of the nonprofits that currently support producers include Project APIS, Seed for Bees, which you can learn more about from our first webinar on the YouTube page, which I highly recommend you spend some time browsing on with some popcorn in hand, of course. There are also additional groups like Xerces Society that focus a little bit more on butterfly conservation and more specifically monarch butterfly conservation, pheasants and quail forever, who provide cover crop seeds that provide additional benefits of bird feed. And then there's educational nonprofits that provide resources to farmers, such as the Wild Farm Alliance, CAF, also known as Community Alliance with Family Farmers. And then there's certifications that you could gain through these practices through groups like the Pollinator Partnership. So if you have any questions, concerns, or want to share about your operation, non-regulatory public agencies like UC Cooperative Extension and RCDs, more specifically the Contra Costa RCD, are here to provide you with various forms of technical assistance. And I think that's all I have, unless Kanyar, Rob, Julio, if you guys want to add anything or.
Well, I'd jump off that and say that even if you listen to this presentation and weren't excited by either EQIP or CDFA, just know that we're all here to help. We exist far beyond these two programs. As Derek mentioned, we do offer technical assistance. So we'd love to just meet you, learn with you, learn who you are, what you're looking to do, and see if there's other resources out there that we can find to help you guys succeed on your farms and ranches.
Great point, Ben. Thank you. And thank you, Derek, for that great presentation. And also to point out that UC Cooperative Extension advisors and education specialists as well, we're here to support you as well. And you can always reach out to us for technical questions. We definitely hope to hear from you. These are definitely practices we'd like to see more of. And we recognize there are challenges to implementation, both in terms of costs and technical issues. And that's what we're here for. Mm-hmm. So thank you to all our presenters, Ben, Derek, and Brenda. We are going to go into a little Q&A now. So there were some good questions. I have a few questions myself. So first, just there was a couple of questions about technical issues. Bob wrote, we should discuss cover crops and till versus no-till and soil health. What is the most effective for healthy soil? I think for the most part, I'd like to refer you rather to, we have 9 webinars that really get into all those discussions in great detail. So I really do encourage you to go back and take a look at those. And so I
go ahead.
Go ahead, Ben.
Well, I was going to say that, there's no one practice is going to be a silver bullet for anything on a farm or ranch. It's going to be part of a combination of various management practices that are going to work together to address some of the resource concerns. So I think that's one of the big things I want out of this webinar series is that, cover cropping is not the silver bullet, but it is a good practice in concert with others that will benefit your farm or ranch.
Thanks. And can I add a couple quick things?
Yeah, go ahead, Rob.
Thanks. On the urban ag side, I just wanted to mention a couple things. Many of the urban ag groups are on various kind of land access points, right? Sometimes it's public agency land, sometimes it's private land. All depends, but in that micro growing situation, often many of the groups are thinking about diversified revenue streams. And so these programs, whether they're public agency, governmental programs, or the various nonprofit ways to access resources, can also just uplift ultimately your bottom line, your ability to survive and continue to flourish and be a viable urban farm in your local community and a resource as well. So I wanted to mention that. Also, although the vast majority of this webinar has centered on Contra Costa County's resource conservation and UC cooperative extension efforts, we also are very active in the whole Bay Area with the urban farming program and the East Bay Ag Crops program. And so I wanted to just highlight one other thing. We're now in, I believe, year 6 of the Alameda County's Resource Conservation's Urban Ag Mini Grant Program, which is getting ready to be released in the late summer, early fall. So if you're in Alameda County, please do just kind of keep a watch on that. And I did put my contact info, and I believe Julio did as well, in the chat if we can be a helpful resource. Thanks so much.
Fantastic, thank you, Rob. Julio made a good point that I should review the first question we had from John, where some of the requirements for the EQIP program can be found online. And so you can find that probably if you pull up the Q&A and look under the written answers, but I'll read it here. A pretty helpful website Brenda wrote, doesn't hurt to, here, there's a pretty helpful website. She's put the link in, and I'm going to try to copy that into the chat as well for you. But I think she highlighted that, you know, usually it's the best bet, as Ben also highlighted, is to get in touch with the office and kind of talk about what you're interested in, and they can guide you from there. So that's, you know, very personal service here. That's really an advantage of having these wonderful agencies.
Yeah, and also, Kamia, if I can write on that really quickly, it's just also the reason why I always like to emphasize just contacting the local office is I noticed that a lot of my farmers, they tend to, when they go to the website, it's kind of overwhelming. It provides a lot of information, and sometimes just reading into them is a little bit difficult, such as the requirements for like veteran farmers and stuff like that. It gets pretty specific. So generally, I always just to say it's best to just refer to the local office if you'd like. It definitely doesn't hurt. That's what we're here for. So you're more than welcome to contact your local office.
Just one other quick thing. There are a number of people on the various staff of the various organizational partners here that speak multiple languages. So if English is not your first language, we still want to be helpful as much as possible.
Great point. Thank you, Rob. Moving on to just to address a couple of questions from Alex that are of more technical nature. One regarding compost quality and about sending samples for carbon dioxide or perhaps carbon generally. So I would just say, you know, we're here to answer your questions, and you can reach out to us directly for those concerns. You know, those are definitely the kinds of questions that cooperative extension and the resource conservation districts are particularly oriented towards answering. So please do reach out to us, and hopefully we might have programming to address that more broadly to a broader audience in the future as well. But I won't spend any more time for the focus of our program today on those questions. I'm going to move on to Morgan's question about what % of applications are awarded as part of both the EQIP and the Healthy Soils program.
Yeah, I can take that one first to talk specifically about the Healthy Soils program. Last year, they ran into the excellent problem of they only had, I think, $25 million in funding, but they received something like $35 million in applications. I do not know the exact numbers of that, but that's what the state was, that this is a highly popular program that needs better funded. And I think they turned that around this year. Again, with that $100 million pot is the rumor right now. We'll see what that actually looks like here in a couple of weeks. But I believe the way it worked on the first come first serve basis is even if you got denied an application, what they typically did afterwards was they referred you back to the resource conservation district or the technical assistance provider that helped you out to figure out maybe what the specific error of your application was and how it could be remedied. So just because you get denied maybe while you're applying doesn't mean that you're out of the program entirely. You can obviously reapply as soon as we address whatever issue it is. By and large, I think most people that applied got funded last year, except for the ones that just were after the $25 million pot ran out of money. But unfortunately, I don't have a better answer for that.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on that question, if it's all right. And I was kind of curious, do Brenda or Ben or Derek, do you have a sense of how much of the, in terms of proportion or percentage, how much of the cost of these practices do operations generally get covered? And do you have any sense of how often that's like kind of a critical threshold that makes it from being, an inaccessible practice to becoming implementable?
So for myself, from my understanding, so NRCS, kind of like Ben, I don't have a specific number for how many, what's the general, I guess, acceptance rate. I do want to use this time, I guess, to also say that, yes, ours isn't necessarily a first come, first served basis. It just depends on how well you rank. But it is always best to apply as soon as possible, just because generally the pot of money that we receive, depending on how much they want to fund, they fund a lot of it in the beginning, in the first batch, and then they'll start funding whatever's left in the remaining batches. So I guess technically, yes, it's not first come, first serve, but it is highly recommended to apply as soon as possible, just so we can get in that first batch where the pot of money is a lot bigger. The last, I would say, 2 to 3 years, unfortunately, funding wasn't as grand as it has been before, but we have been able to get a few contracts funded in our office. There is that. But in terms of your question, Kamyar, the rule of thumb for NRCS is they generally like to try to financially assist at least 50% of the cost. That's the rule of thumb. It's never that way all the time, unfortunately. Sometimes people get very lucky and it funds majority, if not all, the project. And then sometimes it's less than 50%. So it really just depends on what practice they're going for and how much materials cost, and whoever their contractor is and things like that. So it really just depends on how they, I guess, spend and how much they purchase things for. But the rule of thumb is they try to at least pay for at least 50% of the project. But in terms of how many people get funded each year, the past couple of years, we just haven't been getting as much funding. But they usually like to, what happens is California does really well on getting a lot of applications. So they tend to request more money near the end. So sometimes we'll have what we call a last minute batch, where they provide us with some last minute funding that we were able to receive after they requested some more, and then fund whatever is, I wouldn't say whatever's left, but more of what we have extra funding for.
And to piggyback off that just a little bit, the Healthy Soils program, I believe, last year at least, used the same payment rates that EQIP used. So they just mirrored those costs outright. And I believe those payment rates, by and large, are developed by economists within the agency, somewhere in like New Mexico or something. So they're taking all of this data in and then basically coming up with payment rate scenarios, which again, that's the same. It's the same for EQIP and for the Healthy Soils program. So then what's expected is, you're told that you'll get X amount of money depending on, for cover cropping, it's a payment rate of dollars per acre or something like that. And then with that amount of funding, plus maybe you'll have to go into your own pocket a little bit, you're expected to, put this many cover crops down on that many acres. How that gets done is largely up to the landowner. So, in some cases, we've seen landowners do it entirely themselves and save some money. Maybe they're able to borrow some equipment from a friend. Sometimes they use that funding to go out and hire a contractor to come in and cover crop their field for them. It's up to the landowner ultimately how to spend that money. But as long as you're meeting the NRCS standard and specification for the practice, which that's something we can talk about on farm, really we're all good.
Yeah, and I apologize, Ben, you might have mentioned this, but as stated, if you have a friend, or we've also had producers just do the project themselves, and that's how they save costs. That's another way to do it. Just of course, as Ben stated, we need to make sure we are following our standards and specifications for the project, but that's another way producers tend to save costs if they're able to install themselves.
Excellent. So I would
And-
encourage. Oh, you have
Sorry, I had
more?
one last thing and this is a little bit in terms of Alex's question specifically about the Healthy Soils program. It's something Rob touched on a little bit too. So the soil testing that you have to get through the CDFA through this program, they have a list of approved soil tests or soil labs, which you can send samples to and then get reimbursed for the cost of that. So I would definitely look into that. Likewise, for compost application, the CDFA has a list of approved compost providers. I'm not sure if, Alex, if you've looked into those lists. There's a few here in the Bay Area. I don't think we have any in Contra Costa, unfortunately, but those may get into some of the more technical questions. And then the other option, another practice that the CDFA will fund under the Healthy Soils program is creating your own compost on farm. There are some rules with that you have to get that compost tested as well. But that may be a way to alleviate some of the concerns you had in your question.
Very helpful, Ben. Thank you for that. Okay, I see we have another question. I was just gonna say also while we were talking about, so yeah, I would encourage our attendees, dream up your questions, and we still have a little bit of time to submit them. I apologize if I missed it while I was doing background work, but it might be worth reiterating in terms of application cycles and deadlines. In terms of timing, when to start thinking about your project and when to contact the office, what are ideal times? Maybe we can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think I can answer it for Brenda too. The best time to contact us was yesterday, and the second best time to contact us is today. We don't have deadlines yet for the Healthy Soils program. Typically, I mean, the way it worked last year, I believe, is it opened in, I want to say mid-April, and then they had planned to have it open through, I think, mid-June is when they expected to run out of funding and blow through that 25 million. But then they had a lot of applications and they ended up closing shop, I think, mid-May. So the Healthy Soils program is different from EQIP in that regard. So really just get in touch with Derek or I as soon as you hear that it's open and you want to learn more. So that way we can really hit the ground running and get you in early. But again, it's anyone's guess as to when this would happen. If I had to speculate, I would guess probably maybe late July, mid-August is when it might open, and then go a little bit into the fall. But that's purely conjecture on my part. I have no idea.
Yeah, as Ben stated, I would say, if you do have any interest at all, definitely contact us as soon as possible for NRCS, at least for this fiscal year. So NRCS's fiscal year begins in October and ends in September. So unfortunately, we technically have our last batch for the year. The deadline is this week, actually. So unfortunately, this one for this batch we wouldn't be able to go for. But as I stated earlier, I can't make any promises, but there is the possibility of having last minute funding at the end. So before the fiscal year ends. So I definitely say it wouldn't hurt to apply if you do have any interest to apply now. And if we can't go for this year, it definitely can be something that can be rolled over to our next fiscal year and it can get started on that next batch. So yeah, whenever you have any interest at all, definitely contact myself or any of the other planners that was on the slides.
Super, thank you. One last question from me. Again, I think, forgive me if you addressed it and I missed it as I was doing background things here, but it might be good to touch on, are there any restrictions or even disadvantages based on scale? Can you be too small for any of these programs? Or is there any difference between rented versus owned land? Or can you basically apply for in all cases?
The way the Healthy Soils program worked last year was anyone. It could be the smallest farm, a 3-acre urban farm, all the way up to, actually, I believe there's an upper limit. I think I want to say 500 acres is the restriction they have on the Healthy Soils program. It may be funding. I have to look specifically, but by and large, there are no restrictions for being too small. So absolutely, even if you've got a little half-acre urban farm, you know, we can still put carbon dioxide in the soil on that farm. In years past, it's been different because they've had to rank these, I think, and they typically funded the higher sequestering applications. But I think since they've built enough interest in that program, by and large, they now fund just about anyone that applies. Yeah, any bigger than that, I'd have to go look specifically into grant details, but I'm not aware of any restrictions on small farms, certainly.
Yes, same for us. There isn't really a restriction on smaller farms. I think in the beginning, as Ben was stating, the higher end, it really just depends on how well you rank in a certain fund pool, we'll say. So sometimes the fund pool can have a lot of money put into it, but not a lot of applications. So it really just depends on how well the resource concerns rank out. I don't believe we have a maximum acreage, but there is payment limitations on certain practices. So for example, an irrigation system, if you're implementing an irrigation system, there's a payment cap of at least $120,000, I believe. So there is that. And then of course, the overall payment limitation for the farm bill, there is that for per person. The size of the farm, technically no, just as long as you are an agriculture producer.
Yeah, and that just jogged my memory too. The site budget limit is $100,000 over 3 years for the Healthy Soils program.
Okay, thank you very much. So not seeing any further questions from our attendees, I'd like to thank our presenters once more, Ben Weise, Derek Emmons, and Brenda Phrakonekham. And thank you for attending today. You will find this webinar recording, as well as all of our past ones. There's 10 in total at the web address you see at the bottom there. You can also use the QR code scan to get there. And when we conclude our program today, you will see a prompt to open an evaluation. And we are very grateful if you would please take just a few minutes to fill out that evaluation, because it both helps us support and justify our programming, as well as to improve the programming that we bring to you. And yes, we're definitely here to serve you. So we look forward to having you reach out to us in the near future. Thanks again. I will let any of our panelists and hosts want to say anything.
Just say thanks for coming again.
Thank you for having me, and hopefully we'll hear from you guys soon.
Yeah.
I look forward to meeting you.
Fantastic. Until we meet again in person or in cyberspace, all the best to everyone. Have a good day.